the war was over, Mr. Hickman was dismissed from the Army out in Seattle, Washington, and he couldn't return to Columbia. He had a good time in Seattle. He served well, had a happy life, met a very nice lady out there, and got married. So he contacted my dad and offered to sell him the company. And more than that, he offered to sell him the company and allow Dad to pay for it out of the profits over the next several years, which was an unbelievable opportunity.
Because I'm imagining there was no way to buy it without that. I mean, he had no way to even get a loan. He had no resources.
No, he'd come out of 6 or 8 years of recession,
right,
which was struggling even just to put food on the table.
Right.
And now he'd been an employee with the company for 4 or 5, small company. So he did not have any resources. So that made it possible. So Dad and another man who worked there decided to form a partnership, and they bought MD Truckland Motor Company. And they ran it for 5 years.
Right.
They changed the name from MD Hickland to Southern States Motor Lines, and it still was a truckload company. It had about 15 or 20 trucks, and they were hauling things like brick and cotton and building supplies around Columbia. A little bit of Southern States was running out of Columbia. They were running a good bit into Charlotte at that time, and had a few other runs out of that. But basically, that was the operation.
Right.
So it ran well. Dad and his partner got along well. His partner was a good gentleman, but there was one big difference between the two of them. His partner was very happy with running a small trucking company, making a good living out of it, and he was happy doing that for the rest of his life. Dad didn't come off the farm to run a small trucking company or have half interest in a small trucking company the rest of his life. He wanted to grow. He wanted to expand. Wanted to do something, build something. So he started talking to his partner about dividing the company up, and as you can imagine, that was not easy.
So let me get the time frame. So I think, is it 1945 when they bought it from Mr. Hickland?
1945, that's right.
So prior to 45, he was working for Hickland Motor Lines somewhere there. So 1945 is when they bought it from Mr. Hickland. The World War's over. Mm-hmm. So now they're running it together.
Right.
And so now these conversations are going on about let's split, you know.
Have two companies and go each our own way.
Okay. This is a picture of, this goes back to when the purchase from MD Hickland became Southern States Motor Lines. And this is actually an article in the paper about changing the firm name. And I'd like to know a little bit about this building right here, because I think it's got a little history with you growing up and working there as a child. And so tell us about that building there.
That building was a big part of my life, and you're right. It's if you look at it on the right-hand side of it, there's a two-story office environment. The bottom floor was the office. It had 3 offices in it, and that was the total offices for MD Hickland Motor Line, later Southern States Motor Line, and for the first 5 years of the Southeastern's life, it was the office for Southeastern. Above that were a bunch of rooms which men could rent for 50 cents a night. It was a boarding house type environment. On the left, down below, you see the a white face building, and that was a grill. It was an original meat and 3 type restaurant, and it was real popular in that part of the city. It was a good meal. The family that ran that restaurant lived above it, and they worked there they lived there, worked there 7 days a week. And you might remember, as we were growing up, every Sunday we went down and had lunch at the grill. But I ate there a lot. And then to the left, on the far left at the bottom, is an office for the filling station. You see the pumps out front. And starting when I was about, 12, 13 years old, I started working in the filling station in that office and pumping gas. And I did that every summer for almost till I graduated from college. I must have pumped 10 zillion gallons of gasoline. And of course, the truck company was the dock was right behind it. So I was interfacing with the drivers. I was filling up all the Southeastern, Southern State Motor Lines trucks and gas when they came by, and I got to know all the drivers. And it was a good time. But it's interesting. My dad spent 5 years there in that building as working for Mr. Hickland. Then he spent 5 more years in that same building running Southern States Motor Lines. And then the first 5 years of Southeastern's life, we stayed in that building. So he was there for 15 years.
And this was on Gervais Street?
It was on Gervais Street.
Right near where?
It's the 500 block of Gervais, right across where the Publix is now.
Okay.
Right just past you, about 2 blocks up from the river.
So in Columbia, from 1950 to 1955, you were in that one facility. There was a restaurant, it was a filling station, it was the office and the warehouse. And then And then in 1955, Southeastern built its first service center, as I understand it, and this is it. Can you tell us about this first service center that Southeastern ever built?
It wasn't a particularly impressive looking building, concrete block as you can see. Even the office was concrete block. We couldn't afford at that point in time even to paint it. Dirt yard, and it really shows our inexperience with the LTL business. We didn't understand this cross dock thing that we do today. It was a one-sided dock, had a dock out, and every 3 or 4 trailer spaces there was a door to go back into the warehouse. So a lot of labor. Everything was handled by hand, but it served us well. We were didn't look very impressive, but it was a palace to us. We moved out of Gervais Street where we had 2 spaces to load trucks, and now we had probably a dozen. It had a private office. It really worked out well for us.
Well, good. Well, you mentioned office. I think this is the office in that building. How many people were in that office? Tell us a little bit about that office.
Well, that was not only our general office, but also our terminal, all rolled into one. Those people you see there was the total number of people we had in the general office then. As you can see, the picture was taken from the only private office in the building, and that was my dad's office. And you see right on the corner in the lower right of the picture, there's a telephone, and that was the secretary's office. She was the corporate secretary, the only one we had. On the left was a reception, just a guy worked in the office. Behind that, looking to the rear, was Mr. Drinkett, that you hear so much about. He was one of the original employees and worked for us till the day he died, actually. And then behind that was where our bookkeeper, Mr. Douglas, sat with one lady. And then over on the right, when no one's sitting there, well, that was my space. And it doesn't look too impressive, but you have to realize when we moved into here, I'd been with Southeastern for 2 years, and not only had I not ever had an office, I didn't even have a desk. In the place on Gervais Street, I just moved around whenever anybody was not there. I was sitting in their place, but I was really out of the office most of the time, either picking up freight or making sales calls and that type of thing. So we thought we were on top of the world when we moved into this place.